All right, boys and girls, now comes the fun part. I'm going to totally change the color of this guitar. When I'm done, it's going to be a nice red, deep red hue. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this, a lot of different techniques and a lot of different products. What I like to use is aniline dye mixed in with water, and I'll explain more about that in a minute. You can also use clothing dye. You can use, there are a lot of prepackaged water-based stains that you can use. There's also prepackaged water-based dyes that you can use. And in fact, another really simple and available product is unsweetened Kool-Aid, which you can mix in either water or denatured alcohol, and you can get a nice colored dye that you can apply to the surface, and it does a pretty good job. But I like the aniline dyes because they were made specifically for dyeing wood and cloth. They do an excellent job. They're very intense, and a little tiny bit of dye goes a long way. But they're not as readily available. Most people are going to find they have to order it and wait till it arrives before they can use it. And there's a couple of different suppliers. The product that I use comes from a company called Keda Dyes, and I'll put a link down below in the video description so you can go check out their company. But for I think it's like $13, you get a kit that contains 5 different colors. You get the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue, and then they have black, and then they throw in brown because they know that a lot of woodworkers like to add brown to their dyes. And they're just small packets, but a tiny bit of this stuff goes a long way. And the way I mix it up is I'll take about 2 cups of water and put it in a microwave safe container, put it in the microwave, zap it until it's boiling. And then I'll take one of these plastic utensils and I'll put just a tiny pea-sized scoop on the end of it and drop it into the water and stir it in. That's all there is to it. The amount you put in obviously is going to determine how intense it is, and that's why I recommend when you make your guitar, you keep the pieces that you cut away and use those to test the dye on. And you may find yourself having to add a little bit more dye or adding a little bit more water to get the intensity you want. Now, the important thing to understand about any water-based dye or stain is that once they've been applied, they look great when it's wet. But once it dries, they turn fairly flat and dull. And I know a lot of people, when they've done it, they panic and think, oh my gosh, I've ruined the finish. But in truth, as soon as you apply your clear coat over the top, the color will magically come back to life. So once it's dry, don't judge the final result by the way it looks dry. That's why I recommend test it out completely on scrap. Wipe some on the scrap, let it dry, and then just brush some of your clear coat over the top to see how it's going to look. And then I think you'll be a little bit more confident in what's going to happen. Another thing that I should mention as I get started here is some people don't like to use water-based products because they raise the grain. After you've sanded, the surface of the wood is covered in short fibers, and when you apply a water-based product to it, as that water dries, those fibers curl and are pointing straight up. So when it's dry and you put your hand across it, you'll feel that kind of coarse texture. And there's a couple of ways that you can deal with that. You can actually pre-wet the surface before you apply the dye, let it dry, and then just lightly wipe over the top with some fine grit sandpaper to remove that. Or if you're like me, you don't really worry too much about it. You just apply the dye, let it dry, and then just do a light wiping with sandpaper, and that usually takes care of it. You can also mix the dye with denatured alcohol, and denatured alcohol shouldn't raise the grain nearly as much. Now, of course, a lot of it depends on the denatured alcohol. Some of it's more pure than others, and the more pure it is, the less it raises the grain. But you see how intense that is as it goes on. It's pretty strong stuff. But the other problem I find with using a denatured alcohol is because alcohol dries so incredibly fast, it doesn't allow the dye, the pigment, which is very fine, to penetrate deeply enough into the wood. So what happens is it's not, it doesn't go down as deeply, and so if you have to sand back a little bit on the top, it doesn't go down as deep into the wood. And you can see how that's pretty strong stuff. But it really looks nice. I love the way aniline dyes look. Now, once you've applied the dye and let it dry, if it's not intense enough, you can come back and throw down another color, and that will deepen it a little bit more. But there's only so far you can go. It's better to mix up a stronger batch of dye and then apply it than it is to try and keep adding coats, because there's no binder in this. So once it's dry and I apply a fresh coat, I'm just re-wetting the dye that was underneath it. So. It'll take about 45 minutes to an hour for the water-based dye to dry. That depends on the environment and temperature and humidity. And once it's done, as you can see, it's kind of flat and dull. I'm not sure if that'll translate over to video. But now the next step is I need to seal the dye into the wood, because remember, it was just aniline dye mixed with water. There's no binder in it, so there's really nothing holding it into the wood. It's not going to go anywhere. It's pretty hard to get any of it to come off. So, but it's just a good idea to seal it in so that the next steps won't reactivate the dye and cause it to come out of the wood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a water-based poly. It's the same product that I'm going to be using to top coat it. And I'll explain more about that product and why I use it in the part where I start shooting the top coats. But for now, I'm just going to put down a quick coat and we'll seal it in.